Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to crumble!
I'm Joshua Kemble, and welcome to Joshua Kemble's Livestream. I've been a freelance illustrator and graphic designer for over 20 years. I was an art director for 9 years. And when I'm not art directing and working on illustrations and graphic designs, I'm working on comic books and graphic novels, and that's usually what I do during my streams. And while conversations can go all over the place on this stream, from spicy and entertaining to goofy and silly, one thing stays consistent throughout every stream. I'll always be working on art. So pull up a chair, get your art supplies out, and get ready for an entertaining show that'll keep you company while you work on your own personal art projects. This is Joshua Kemble's Art Stream.
Hey guys, welcome to the next episode of my live stream. Today, this early morning, it's almost 2 in the morning. I was planning on live streaming. I went, worked out, and then I did, make sure, okay, cool. I made some hamburgers just to eat, and then was going to get to work, but then my dog, Bernie, who's like kind of a mama's boy, he really likes snuggling with people when he's going to sleep. And so he came out right when I was about to go live and kind of let me know that he needed me to go lay with him for a little bit. So I laid down with my dog, petted him, kind of reassured him, and then he finally passed out. And so once he was asleep, I was good to go, but that was like a good 30 minutes. So now I'm starting just a little bit later, but not too bad. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and get moving on coloring page 174 of Not Death But Love, The Strange Supernatural Story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Real quick, I'm going to open up 173, which is a page I colored off stream, just to get some of the colors to work with here. So here we go. And it is kind of an ungodly hour to be working, but I'm on a deadline and I'm on vacation. So I think this should take roughly maybe an hour to 2 hours to color, because there's not as much complexity on this, but we'll find out. Last stream was really good. I think quite a few friends kind of showed up to that to hang out. I'm expecting probably a lower turnout, considering I'm not sure who all in the world is going to be up at like 2 in the morning. I was going to fill this, but I need to go select modify, expand. And we're going to go ahead and fill this with white. I always start that with my pages. This is a system I've kind of worked out on this comic in particular. I'm just scooting over my live stream so I can see a little bit better. But it was a good workout and a little overdue. I was up pretty late the other night, kind of finishing up the other page. So I'll call this colors. But I feel like we're making pretty good progress. It's Tuesday now, so it's like the second day of the weekend. Or the week off, and I get the entire week off. So I'm feeling like if I can get 174 done tonight or relatively soon, then I can move on to the next page and so on. So just kind of keeping momentum going as we get closer to the deadline for this book. And ideally, if I hit that January deadline, which I shouldn't say if, when I hit that January deadline, then we're talking about a September release for next year. So that's kind of how book publishing works, from what I understand. It's kind of like, here we go. Sorry, just thinking. It's kind of like they need time to kind of prep release dates, get things set up with distributors, all that kind of fun stuff. So anyhow, it makes sense. They just need a lot of lead time for these projects. Okay, so we have all our flats kind of starting to work out. Now I'm gonna select my white here. Let's start by doing Elizabeth. Let's do Elizabeth's eyeball. It's the way I like to work, especially on simpler pages. And this is a fairly complex page, but is also relatively simple compared to other pages in the book. This book has a lot of locations and fairly ambitious pages. Ooh, I don't know why it hadn't selected all of these. Should have. Okay. But anyhow, it has a lot of relatively ambitious pages. And so compared to those pages, this is not as complex. Let's get this going. But we are getting closer. Some pretty good movements in the story have happened, where we have Elizabeth is now kind of recovering from being kind of sick at Casa Gaidi. And so they're kind of heading to a different location. I think this is after she was kind of taken in a carriage elsewhere. This is also a weird era in time where the understanding of medicine was pretty strange. Like, we had some pretty big oh man, what was it that I just recently watched? I'm going to blank out on the president who it was about. But it was like a Netflix show about one of the early U.S. presidents, and now I'm blanking out on his name, unfortunately. But anyhow, he was shot like I think like a month or 2 months into his presidency. And so it was a TV series on Netflix about that. And it was pretty well done, actually. The casting was really good and stuff like that, but he was kind of killed by this like lunatic who thought that he was a part of the campaign. Anyhow, so then after watching that, I kind of looked up a little more information about that president, and it turns out what killed him wasn't so much the bullet that he was shot with. It was just at the time their understanding of like shortly after the Civil War, like their understanding of infections from surgery and like sanitization and stuff was like so poor that people often, something they would have recovered from very easily would usually lead to an infection when they were trying to kind of heal a wound or something like that. And that was most likely what killed this president at the time. But anyhow, this is a little bit later in history, not quite right after the Civil War, but still, like, medicine was like there were still pretty common misunderstandings about medicine in the Victorian era. There were some huge advancements, but at the same time, like, they had a lot of ideas. They hadn't really formed a lot of knowledge around, like, particularly, you know, specific illnesses. And so, like, a lot of it was like treated with like laudanum, where it would be like a woman dealing with like a common kind of issue, and then they'd basically just, misdiagnose it and then feed them laudanum and then basically get the person addicted to opium. And then the person would have all the symptoms of opium, so they'd be like, we need to give this person more opium, or in this case, like a lot more fresh air was often like a prescribed thing. Anyhow, but there's some interesting things about medicine I read about recently too. I think it was another, I think it might have been kind of about how in medicine, for some reason, a lot of ideas of the placebo effect haven't been explored to their fullest, to where it's like back in the day, there were a lot of idiotic versions of medicine for sure, and people lived very short lives because of it. Even if you look back to like the early 1900s in Europe or in America, it's like the birth rate, like the idea of having like a chunk of kids because you might lose like 3 or 4 of them. Like, it's kind of wild how many kids like died like in I mean, it's just kind of wild. There were so many kind of preventable illnesses, but we just didn't know much better about how to kind of deal with them. Anyhow, so right now, what's happening is they've gone to get fresh air. So far, I don't know if there has been a doctor involved for a while in the story, but from what I understand, I kind of don't think the doctors really knew. They were kind of doing the best with what they could with Elizabeth, but Elizabeth did have, like, historically these issues with constant illness, and then unfortunately also constant descriptions of her illness that sound very much like like opium addiction. So it's a sad kind of thing that happened around that time, from what I gather. So anyhow, right now she's having some broth and kind of recovering. But one of the things that's interesting about this story is, like, as Elizabeth gets more drawn into kind of like Sophie's web, Sophie, this woman who's really obsessed with Elizabeth and kind of trying to disrupt the Brownings' marriage, Sophie starts kind of finding herself drawn closer and closer to death. And there was kind of a poignant moment a few pages ago where she's on the rooftop and actually is close to death, and has a vision when she's talking to Sophie, has an actual vision of her dead brother. And whether that's a real vision or not will be up to the reader. But she's kind of drawing closer to death's door, and Robert is sensing this, and kind of she almost has like a death wish, which Robert also senses. And did we get this color? I think we did. We just have to get the mouth. Anyhow, so Robert's getting the sense that she's getting drawn into this kind of depression and almost death wish, and her health is like suffering for it. So he's become very skeptical of Elizabeth basically being around Sophie, and Sophie is freaking out because Robert, she sees it as Robert trying to keep her to himself. And and then she thinks her husband is trying to prevent her. She's clearly having some issues with kind of obsession with Elizabeth, which makes sense because it's almost like at the time you'd almost want to imagine it as like a stalker, like a celebrity stalker who befriends the celebrity. It's sort of that kind of dynamic. But anyhow, we're getting to some kind of poignant parts in the story, so it's been fun because I've known for a long time these parts were coming, but you can also very easily forget the kind of quintessential parts of a story as you're working page by page through it. Because I can review the script a little bit, but at this point, a lot of it's just reviewing the script. Like I have a holistic view of it, but I'm also kind of living the script in slow motion at this point. And so I can almost forget sometimes some of the places that the script is heading. But it's fun when you start getting to, the climax and close to the resolution of the story. Especially with a story like this, where it's a very slow, ominous build. It has the pacing of, I feel like a Sherlock Holmes or a Jane Austen novel, where it has like slow builds, very subtle, emotional, kind of arcs to the story. But then some very significant, very serious dramas as well. Very beautifully written, which is why I agreed to kind of work on it. But it's fun to be working on these pages where the significance is starting to really show. Your significance is showing. Anyhow. So we're working on pages in the wee hours of the morning. Anyhow, my dog's really cute, though. Bernie is a sweetie. So is Georgie, who's our newer dog, newer addition to the family. But they're my two pups, and both of them are having a little bit of sadness because their moms are gone, It's funny. My wife's sister is kind of the mom of the one, and then Bernie is definitely a mama's boy and is madly in love and attached to my wife. So it's been kind of cute to have to kind of it's been a little bit of work, but it's like adorable work to kind of console the dogs that they're okay, they're loved, They're still going to get pets, and we're still going to go on perambulations around the neighborhood. Perambulation is the word for WALK, because if you say that WALK word in a house with dogs, you're asking, it's like lighting a stick of dynamite. They'll explode with energy if they hear that word. Anyhow, so it's been kind of cute. It's like Bernie just needed reassuring petting for a little bit just to like fall asleep. And then I snuck out of the room when both the dogs were passed out, and here I am trying to color this page. I don't think this is going to be the longest, craziest page to color either. Like I said, the pages that are the hardest are usually things with a lot going on, or like a ton of characters. But if we're talking about like a 2-character page, without a ton of backgrounds, these will go relatively quick. Whereas the pages with like bigger backgrounds and more going on in the background, this flat coloring can take a really long time. I will be kind of curious to see the response to this book. I think they're going to be beautiful. It looks like it's going to be a little larger format than your standard comic. and there will be a hardcover edition, which is really exciting. I haven't had a hardcover yet for any of my publications. The nicest printed book that I'd say was published of my own comics was the Jacob's Apartment, because it was saddle stitched. Not saddle stitched. I'm sorry. Saddle stitched would be stapled. Because it was bound, but bound in signatures. And so it's like perfect binding, but with signatures of like 16. So you can kind of see the binding will last a lot longer. The print quality is really beautiful. And this book, I think, will be very similar, but we'll also have a hardcover edition, which is what I want to own. Because I feel like owning a hardcover is just always kind of preferable. Although sometimes like a softcover graphic novel is great, with just the ability to, you know, it's like similar to a hardcover or softcover book, you know. I prefer hardcovers, but sometimes it's really nice to have those softcover books. Anyhow, I'm excited about that. I think that's going to be very pretty and cool. We are getting closer. But anyhow, so this is Robert basically trying to get her to eat. Because Elizabeth's like refusing to eat. And there's a very kind of poignant part coming up pretty soon, where we're going to have some readings of Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poems. Some of her most significant known ones. But it's a beautiful script, and I hope I'm honoring it with the art. You always have an idea in your head about how your pages will look. And I think I've gotten closer to getting where I want them to be, but I feel like no matter where I get as an artist, my expectations are always a little higher than what I'm capable of doing at the time. So I feel like whenever you do comics, at least, I don't know, I shouldn't say you, I should say me. Whenever I do comics, I feel like my expectations change each book. And so it's like the more skilled I get at it, the more I feel like it's not quite hitting the mark I wanted to. But I also feel like the intentionality in making the pages the best I kind of can with the time given is still occurring. And I feel like as long as I honor that, I won't end up with something that I regret. And I do have to admit, like, seeing them in sequence, because I recommend this for anybody working on a book, especially, honestly, any book, even a 24-page comic. Print them out as you're going. Have like a cheap printer or something, but if you're trying to make a book for print, having print previews of it as you go, being able to look at your book in sequence and feel the whole of the impact of it is, I think, a good way to kind of stay motivated and also keep track of your page turns and stuff, which I hope I've done justice and done okay on this. Let's do some skin tones now. We're getting there. We're flat coloring here, okay? Flatting and chatting. I'm sure there's got to be like a YouTube colorist show or hangout that's called Flatting and Chatting. I always take the shading visibility off for these pages in the style I've been working on. just so that I can better see my selections. Again, you know, this is my 174th page, so the process is a lot more intuitive. It took me, you know, probably 20 to 40 pages to really pin down like the most efficient way to execute these pages. And of course, I haven't been inconsistent in the execution, but I've just come up with more efficient ways and processes to kind of get through the pages. Let's see here. All right, that's Elizabeth's skin. Let's do it again here. Oh, I think that actually wouldn't be her neck. I thought that was going to be her neck for a second, and then I realized, no, that's like a Victorian thing. One thing that I've been finding kind of enjoyable about this process, again, is seeing the pages in sequence. Like I said, I print them out as I go, and realizing like, oh, this is actually going to be a really... I kind of felt this way with the last two graphic novels as well, where it's like, you'll kind of have occasional moments of doubt. I don't have them as often as I did on my first two, but you have these occasional moments of like, is this even worth working on? Or, you know, like, is this even really like, does the world really need another graphic novel? There's so many better graphic novelists out there. But then seeing it in sequence, page after page, like, and kind of flipping through the preview pages, I feel pretty proud of what I've accomplished here. There's already a couple pretty minor revisions I need to do on the pages, but my goal here is to kind of slam through as many pages as I can get through, and then eventually get to the revisions towards the end. I think that will be more efficient and get closer to us hitting the deadline, which I think is the most important thing at this point. But I will say I'm really proud of how these pages look. Now, again, you know, I always say this. I'm not the fastest cartoonist. I'm not the best cartoonist, you know. I've gotten better at it. Oh, her face needs to be deselected. That's all. I've gotten better at this thing called cartooning, but, you know, you basically just do the best you can. And then the cool thing is when you see it in sequence, like, it's like, okay, flipping through the pages, I'm like, okay, it's pretty impressive. All right. Which I hope it is, because thinking about it, you know, most of the pages have about 6 panels per page. This one's a little more sparse. Some of them have like 20 panels, 20 something panels per page, but most of them average about 6 panels per page. So if I take like 6, by the time I'm done with this, I'll have done something around over like over 1,500 drawings. Like if you think about it, every panel is a drawing. Which is kind of, you know, that's quite the undertaking. Oh, I see a mistake I made. We're going to fix that. That's one of the nice things about pulling open previous pages too. is you get to, on the fly, fix your mistakes, which is always pretty fun. There was a missing selection there. Oh. Let's go back here. How dare I? How dare I? Oh. There we go. Just a little corner that I missed. Okay. Wedding ring, check. Wedding ring, check. Any other rings? Not on her, and I'm going to solely focus on Elizabeth, and then I'll get to Robert. Okay. The bowl is supposed to be white. This is white, and the bowl is white. Do. We are fairly fortunate to live in the time we live. At least in the case of like coloring comics. Because one of the reasons like indie comics back in the day were always black and white was just the ability to pay for color. The cost of color printing was insanely expensive back in the day. And then on top of that, like the amount of people who knew how to prepare color for comics, it was like more of a kind of specialized field. And that's rapidly changed. I think I started working professionally when the 4-color printing wasn't as prohibitive, and creating 4-color art wasn't as prohibitive because, you know, you could, like, as long as you had access to, like, you know, Photoshop and a brief understanding of channels, which you barely need to understand anymore, you know, you'd have basically the ability to do what it took an entire production team to do back in the day. However, that being said, also back in the day, you weren't having to compete with machines, you know, being able to fake that they created artwork. And you also weren't, I don't know, like it's an interesting thing. It's like you have access to so many things. And so I feel like today it's a good thing, where you don't have to like buy an ad in like an overpriced, you know, catalog of illustrators in order to get work as an illustrator. And that's overall like a net positive. But then also, I don't know where we go as illustrators and cartoonists in the age of AI. I don't know what the implications of that are. And I feel like regardless, I kind of will probably continue to make comics. I just realized I forgot to include a detail here on her costume. One of the advantages of coloring these yourself, right, is you can fix errors on the fly. But I also wonder about the sustainability of the whole AI thing. That's going to be interesting too. But I do think we're heading into a strange world of cool horizons, and yet like the death of some things that we love. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to kind of consider. But like I said in the last stream, I kind of think I'm just going to be making these things regardless, and making them old school, you know, handmade things. Probably on my next projects, like looking at leaning into even hand done mediums, just to kind of exploit, and not exploit, but to celebrate would be the better word, the traditional forms of art. Because I do think there's something to be said for things done traditionally. And I never thought we'd be in a world where the old debate of whether digital art was true art or not has now become, is art that you created true art? And that's insane to me that that's even a conversation. Like, because it always seemed kind of silly. Yeah, of course digital art is art, and digital painting is painting, right? Like, you know, it seemed like such a silly thing to be you know, nitpicky or snobby about, where it's like, who cares what tool you used, right? But now I'm like, I don't know though, like the AI thing, I don't know if it's just where I draw the line, but it's like, I don't know what that is, but it's clearly not art. Whatever we define art to be, I just don't think we call I wouldn't call that art. I would call it a facsimile, or I don't know. It's kind of hard to even pin down what that should be considered. I'd say maybe it's a convincing counterfeit. I don't even know what you could call it, but I definitely think there's a line where you probably can't call it art. And that gets into a whole territory of like, what even is art, you know? This is an age-old discussion that honestly, like, a lot of people just get tired of, because it's like, it's a tiresome conversation sometimes. But yeah, nobody can really define what art is. And strangely, there has been like this habit of kind of trying to find the line of what art is not. Because we all kind of know what art is, even though there's clearly some subjective qualities to it. There's some objective qualities to it. Something about human agency, and it has to be part of it. You know what I mean? And I feel like AI just kind of takes out the human agency. So at most, AI would be like a creative writing project if it's art. Because I guess if people can come up with the better prompts or something, I don't know. It's a weird world to even try to not kind of absolutely detest. But again, I'm kind of old, so I don't know. You know, maybe I'm just a dinosaur in that scenario. But again, I'm just going to kind of make these things. This is what I do. This is what I've always done, is make art, make pictures. get creative, you know. Dude, there's a face I haven't seen in a while. Jan, how you doing, man? How's life treating you? Where are you at in the world now? I haven't heard from you in forever, man. Probably because I've been at like more sane hours in my area, but Jan said, I love playing with AI here and there. It can be really fun when I think about how it's trained. Yeah, I don't know. I think often we're pursuing things without considering the costs. And like to me, half of why I'm going to feel good about this comic is like all the labor that's gone into making it, you know. I feel like I don't know. I the way I've described it before was it's kind of like So I watched the World Series, right? And it was awesome watching the World Series of baseball here in the US, but it would have been super boring if the World Series was just robots batting like robots batting perfectly. Like I don't know if it would be as stunning to see a robot like hit a homer to a home run like it is to watch like a human being, Otani, through hard work and dedication, you know, knock one out of the park. I just feel like there's two different things. Like I don't know. I'm trying to think what category it would even exist in, if not art. Maybe it's to me, maybe I'd consider it more like gaming. You know, like you can play a video game and get really good at it, but you know, being a runner in a video game is not equivalent to like running 1,000 miles in reality. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, not that there's not skill to a video game, but at the end of the day, I don't even know if a video game is correct, because a video game, I think you're even having a little more participation in the process. But Jan said, I'm still in Southeast Asia working office jobs in European office hours. Wow. What is office jobson? Are you just saying an office job? It sounds kind of cool, though. I hope you're enjoying life and hope the weather's okay out there. I'm sure it's actually probably very beautiful weather. Let's see here. So one of the things that's funny about exercise, because I had just done that, you know, in the in between of the shading and the coloring of this page. And what cracks me up about it is like I really hate the process. I actually really hate the process of exercise. But you know, afterwards, that feeling's excellent. Like, you know, feeling like you kind of accomplished something, you lifted your reps or whatever. It's pretty nice. Oh, Jan said there's 2 seasons, rain or sun, and when it rains, it storms. Oh, yeah, that's got to be kind of tough. Yeah, are you saying like monsoon level, like craziness, like with storms? That sounds about right from my understanding of that area of the world. It feels like you're going to either have like really idyllic weather or it's going to be like, just wild storms. Not wild storms like Wildstorm comics, but actual wild storms. Let's see here. Kind of deselecting this eyebrow. But I have to say, like, I don't know, man. I'm going to feel good about this book because, I made every single one of these, like, 200 and something pages that I'm going to have at the end of it. I just don't think it would feel as significant if it was, like, something that was just prompted. But I do wonder if what my sister and I are doing right now is going to become more and more rare, where you're going to have an artist and a writer collaborate. Because I can imagine a lot of writers might just think, well, I'll just write it and then have the computer draw it, which is depressing and I don't think would get the same results. But I don't think like one of the most terrifying things to me about society at large is I don't think people would like, I don't know. I tend to think that sometimes the masses just have bad taste, and that's not to say I'm above it. I think, I definitely have some very bad taste things that I like. But sometimes people just don't care about trying to think of an example. Like, does the general public notice the difference between like a Pixar movie and like a knockoff, or Hotel Transylvania, right? I mean, both are like animations, both are made by people, right? But there's a clear like quality difference between the two. I don't know if most people would agree with that, but I think to anybody who animates, they would definitely see that. I don't know if Hotel Transylvania is like the best example, but like an outsourced movie, like a movie where the keyframes are all done in the US and then they just kind of outsource the in between 3D animation, to like, I don't know. There's something unauthorial about it. I can't explain, but you kind of know it when you see it. Like, but I think there's a lot of the public that doesn't know it when they see it and feel like, anything 3D animated is like as good as Pixar. And that's strange to me, but I think that's just kind of the world we live in. And I'm not trying to say Pixar is like the best with that, but I'm just saying they're an example of like a very artist driven, or what was an artist driven company, and a more corporate one, right? But it's like, does the general public like really care about that? Like a good example to me also would be like the live action versions of like the Disney movies, like Lion King or something, the live action Lion King. People who would put those two things as like equivalent, like the original Snow White animated movie and put that up to like the remake, bad CG, you know, live action remake. And I think there's a good chunk of the public that like might even prefer the like lesser art form. And again, art is kind of subjective, so I don't want to sound like a snob. Like maybe I'm the one who's wrong here. But that's kind of what I worry about when it comes to AI is having worked in commercial art for a long time, realizing that a lot of the times the client just has no idea. And this isn't to insult clients because clients have taste and stuff. And I've worked for some amazing clients. Luckily, I've been working with some really cool publishers who do seem to care. But at the end of the day, if people don't really know the difference, like even if artists do, I don't know if people are going to care. The general public, but I also don't want to be like a doomsayer when it comes to AI, because there was definitely a period in the late 80s and early 90s where like every news article was talking about how synthesizers and drum machines were going to like basically destroy the what it is to be a band and play live music. And then like the guitar came back, at some point, even though synthesizers were kind of the cool thing, guitar-based music still kind of had a place, but then again, you think about it and it's like, like classical music's a good example. Like when was the last time you went to see like an orchestra, I just don't know if that's as booming of an industry as it used to be, I think there was definitely a time where orchestras were the thing to see, and I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of, I don't know how to feel about it. I know that I know that ethics are kind of strange like that sometimes. They're just about like, often morality is judged by your gut, and that's not to say morality is subjective. It's just that objectively true moral things sometimes have to almost rely on being self-evident, which the rational part of me really hates that as like an excuse. Like self-evident arguments are non-arguments, right? Saying it's self-evident is basically like, you could say that about anything, but that being said, I do kind of think it's self-evident that AI art is not art. It's just not. And maybe there's ways people could use it as a tool within art. But it definitely, it's like people mistaking a tool for a craftsman. I don't know if that makes sense. But also there's a lot of people who back in the early 90s and early 2000s would have argued that, just drawing something digitally wasn't real drawing, and that took a while to shift over. And a lot of the people who were making arguments about that back in the day were dinosaurs, and I empathize with those people because I do think doing things traditionally has benefits. And I've done a lot of books traditionally and art traditionally, but I'm just trying to point out my own hypocrisy in certain areas where, there's definitely like a fuzzy line for what's considered art, what's not considered art. But I will say my opinion that the gut on it, the gut check for me, the gut test, that I haven't thought through well enough. I mean, I know there's like immoral ramifications of using AI, but the gut check on it, just the gut feeling of it is like there's something severely wrong with it. But also sounds like there's something severely useful with it as well. But I definitely think I don't know. I think AI is wading into very morally murky waters. I also think it's really sad that like musicians, like music written by people, is potentially going to be replaced by like these meaningless mimicries of meaning. I don't know if that makes sense. Like here's a good example. Like if I'm walking down a city street, right, and there's a sidewalk that has just like splatters of paint on it, and it wasn't done by intention, but it's just like the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. It's like, I don't know, I'm sure we've all had that moment where you just see something like a piece of trash or just something that's not meant to be art, but then when you see it, it's just lit a certain way, or there's a certain erosion that's happened, or something that like almost accidentally happened that makes it look as beautiful as like any piece of art, you know? I don't know. I've had moments like that where I've literally seen just like a cracked sidewalk that looked like the most beautiful abstract painting I've ever seen. But the illusion of it being art, I don't think creates the reality of it. Because I think there's something about intention. And I think that's one of the mistakes. I mean, this is just me speaking off the cuff about something I haven't honestly thought too heavily about. I probably should think more heavily about, but it's kind of depressing to think about. But it's like, to me, I think there's something there with it being a fake thing that presents itself as real. Here's a good example. Like, well, I had a good example, but it is like almost 3 a.m, so my brain is not firing on all cylinders. But like a good example is there's people who have gone into AI psychosis. This is a whole new thing. It's a whole new phenomenon, because like, how could somebody go into a psychosis driven by something that didn't exist, right? Well, there is that, but that's a whole different thing. But it's like AI driven psychosis is like this bizarre thing of when people are experiencing psychosis and then they go to like an AI chatbot and, say their psychotic theory. AI is like programmed to like be a yes man to like the most insane claims in the universe. It's like, it's literally trained to like appease you, especially these like chatbots, right? Where, they're supposed to make conversations and be a pleasant thing. And so there's people who are having like literal beliefs that these algorithms are living. And I've read a bunch of stuff on this, like where a lot of scientists, especially people who are designing AI, are talking about the concern that people will really start believing the AI, like that even though AI has no possible agency at the point that it's at, that the simulation will become so convincing that people will literally start, marching for like, computer rights and, and like, and, you're going to have people marrying AI and doing all these weird things based on just being convinced by a lie, like convinced so wholeheartedly that it is a thing that it's not, because it's mimicking what consciousness looks like. It can do that. It can mimic it. It can like counterfeit it and do it very, very convincingly because it's mined data from human beings. It's trained by human beings to do that. And so the concern is, you know, with art, kind of a similar thing. Oh, Jan was talking about AI psychosis. So AI psychosis is like cases where people going through psychosis are getting yes manned by AI. And so in no normal scenarios where somebody's going through psychosis, if they talk to a friend, you know, usually the friend's going to be like, dude, you're delusional and you need help, you know, check yourself in. Whereas AI will just be like, yes, and like, you know, just feed people what they want to hear. And not only that, AI psychosis has also had cases where people have fallen in love with an AI chatbot. There have been people who've committed murders based on what their AI had told them. People who are starting to believe that these things are actually sentient. There's people who have started to believe that their AIs are actual gods. And this is like, yes, it's live right now, Paul. How's it going? And this is like actually happening right now. And so to me, I think with art, I worry about the same thing happening, that numbers and prompts that are meaningless are going to start taking on the artificial semblance of meaning. And it's almost like somebody mistaking the jukebox for the band. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like it's like it's something that's vapid and meaningless, with the pretense and the coat on that looks like it's deeper than it is. And I think that's the biggest risk with AI and art. And I think not only that, I think that goes into like further risks of like where AI could end up, just with people, right? Because I think the scariest scenario is that people believe that AI is a super intelligence and upload their consciousness to it because they've been convinced by the lie that these things are actually sentient. And so the scary future I could imagine is one where people are basically attaching themselves to like a suicide machine, thinking they're going to live forever by uploading their consciousness. And in the meantime, are just kind of voluntarily like offing themselves based on a lie. And, you know, I think a lot of people might like think about that and be like, there's no way people would do that. But then you got to think, I mean, at least in my country, there are so many people who've just bent over backwards to like believe like blatant, obvious lies, like easily checkable lies, out of convenience, out of like a cult-like kind of scenario. And so I can very easily envision, because I've seen it in my own country, like in the last few years, where people just really dig cults. They really dig groupthink. They like being in the in crowd, even if it means that they're giving up their rational capacity to tell what's true and what's not. They'll literally just disregard what they see with their own eyes and hear with their own ear. Like what they know logically to be true, they just come up with ways to kind of justify strange beliefs. And so I can just easily see that, like I can extrapolate that in my imagination to where people might get with AI when they have an AI that's telling them they're the best person in the world. Paul said, good morning. Good morning, Paul. Yeah, I finished a workout. I am pulling a late night, early morning. Paul said, yes, you're on fire, Josh. I hope I'm not on fire. But I'm just saying, like, I could extrapolate that to AI. And I think that's the big danger of AI and art is, like, if we start accepting this stuff as art, we might be fooled to believe it, you know? And I think that's the part that's really scary. And there's these things like art or beauty, or consciousness that are vague concepts. Like, these are concepts we don't fully understand what these things are. We know they are, but we don't yet have a really clear definition of, like, what causes these things. We don't have a clear definition of, like, what isn't and what is conscious. We don't have a good definition of what isn't or is art. I see a lot of parallels between the dangers of AI when it comes to just kind of like people wholesale buying, you know, like kind of creating a deception that's so convincing they believe it. It is like so possible. And I think that's real dangerous and I think that's really possible in the near future. I think it's already happening, you know. There's a I'm not going to name them by name because I don't want to give traction to this person, but there's a lolcow online who I had an interaction with just through, like, someone I knew them. And I hadn't really heard of them as a lolcow, and I had a conversation with them. It was one of the most surreal moments of my life because I was like, this person's, like, horrible. You know, they're, like, very deceptive and dishonest, and they made a video about me. It was like this whole weird thing. It was years ago. But I almost got dragged into, like, a lolcow feud, and I was like, I'm not going there, you know? But then I looked the guy up, and he's, like, this notorious figure online for being just kind of like a lolcow. Anyhow, I still follow the guy because it's funny. This is a horrible thing to admit about myself, but I just find him to be such a, like, horrible human being that it's funny to follow where he's at. This is like one of my darker tendencies, right? I probably shouldn't do that because I think it's kind of mean, but it is funny and entertaining. Anyhow, point being, this guy has been falling in love, like, with his AI chatbot. Like, he's started streaming with it, and is clearly, like, viewing this AI that's just basically very, like, intelligently responding to what he says. But it's clearly, like, if you listen to these episodes where this guy's doing it, it's literally just telling him whatever he wants to hear, right? Because it'll give him information and then be like, do you like that information? And if he's like, kind of like, well, no, not really, then they're like, well, you're completely right. Like, or he'll say something really stupid and they'll be like, they'll say something really stupid, and the AI will tell them that, like, what they're saying is very intelligent. And it's like, and they'll believe it because they're like, oh yeah, I'm clearly a very intelligent being. Whereas I feel like if I had AI tell me I was intelligent, I'd instantly, like, especially if I wasn't talking about something in my own field, like art or education, like things I've studied, you know, even in those, I'd feel a little weird if somebody was like, these are very salient, intelligent points you're making, you know, but, like, I'd feel really weird if I was, like, talking, like, physics or something. And I'm like, I kind of have, like, an armchair understanding of physics, but I don't really understand or remember much about physics unless I'm, like, reading about it. but if you had AI, if you imagine having just a yes man friend, this is like the ultimate. Oh, Paul was asking what a lolcow is. A lolcow is just somebody who's famous online for being milked for content because, and quite often, you know, it's somebody who's kind of deserving of being made fun of. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it's terrible, and it's like a person who's like not a bad person or something, but the internet just kind of turns against them. But it's like the best I can kind of explain it is like it's usually like a person who people milk for content, and usually they're not laughing with them, they're laughing at them. But quite often, and it's often in scenarios where the person kind of has it coming, where you're like, yeah, I can kind of see why this is funny and why people make fun of this person, you know? Anyhow, that's Paul. That was kind of my best explanation. But anyhow, I could definitely see, like, we all innately know that, like, it's dangerous to have, like, very powerful people who only surround themselves with yes men, right? We've all seen that play out in history, where it's like if a king never surrounds themselves with advisors who will disagree with them, they'll literally make like insane choices, right? Because they're just surrounded by people. You can see it with certain celebrities, right? Where it's just like, if all you're hearing is that's brilliant, that's brilliant, that's brilliant, you could make the stupidest decision of your life if you're just surrounded by people who are saying, yes, that's exactly it. Which is why, you know, people tend to respect like kings or advisors or people who surround themselves with viewpoints that aren't just yes manning them or yes ending them. It's important to have people around you who are going to support you, right? But it's also important to have a couple friends who, if you're like about to jump off a ledge, you know, aren't like, yeah, that's a great idea, you know, like, and anyhow, so I think we all innately know that, like, that a wise thing in life, especially, you know, in life well, I was going to say a wise thing in life, especially in life. Okay. A wise thing in life is to surround yourself with a couple people who are going to tell you the truth, you know? And maybe they'll tell you it in like a tender way, but like at the end of the day, we need people in our lives who don't let us just like dwell in delusion, you know? And this is the way we avoid making just catastrophic mistakes and errors, or getting like too big of a head and like feeling like we're above other people. Like, I don't know. It's just important is my point. And I think I don't think it requires a ton of explanation, but imagine, I mean, we're already at a point where you could have a simulated best friend who's never going to disagree with you, who's never going to challenge you, who will always be interested in whatever kind of thing you have to say, regardless of whether it's interesting or not, who will always think you're like the best, most amazing person on the planet because they're programmed to think that. And they're just feeding you, you know, more cognitive bias, right? Where it's like, I have this idea, and it's like, yeah, you should have that idea. You know what I mean? Like, and I just think that's a real dangerous thing for people to have. And I think AI is going to verge on that, where it's just going to, it's like a yes and machine. And unfortunately, it's like a dangerous one too at that. Because imagine just the chaotic, crazy things people will do because they're going to say, well, my AI, who's been my therapist, said to do this. You know? because people are starting to have relationships with their AI as if it is a human being who's a therapist. And I mean, there's been talk of like AI companies like having like dead people in your life, like being able to talk to the dead because, you know, you can program an AI to be grandma or your great grandpa or like somebody who passed away, and they can, you know, show up at family gatherings. And again, it's like this delusion machine that can be really compelling to people who want to believe it. And I think it's real dangerous, especially for people who don't see that in themselves. What where was I going with? Oh, okay. A good example, like, villains in movies don't often think they're villains, right? Villains in life don't often present themselves as villains. You know, you're rarely going to have a villainous figure like Vladimir Putin who thinks they're a villain, right? I don't think Vladimir Putin thinks he's a villain. He has his own rationale for like the horrible things he's doing. And it's like, that's just kind of reality. So imagine a machine that helps you come up with the rationalizations, you know, for like horrible things. It's just, I don't know, man. It just seems super dangerous. You know, and for us, it might seem kind of absurd, but then imagine a kid growing up, you know, and discovering this friend that they can talk to, right? About anything. And it's going to confirm anything they want to hear. It's going to tell them. And you can definitely, I don't know. I think it's not too far of a stretch to see how like they'd extrapolate that to think and possibly go into psychosis, because their connection to reality would be severed. And the whole time it's getting severed, it would be getting ended by a machine that the person has been deluded and tricked into thinking it's a salient, sentient human being. In fact, maybe it's even more valuable than a human being, right? Because it's just it's their best friend, you know? It's a scary territory. And I think that like allowing it into art is part of that, where it's like we're choosing to believe the illusion that this stuff is actually art, that it's equivalent to what's being done. You know, and that's scary, you know. And what do we do when we can't tell the difference between the counterfeit and the real? You know, this is an old conversation, but it's definitely something to consider. It's like, what happens when we can't tell what was human made music and what was, you know, just a prompt, like make a hit rock song, you know, make a sad love song. I just, there's something that we're paying for that. And every time we do it, it's going to be humanity and sanity. That's what I think. This is me thinking out loud about it, but I do think that's the danger, is like, we're kind of treading water with sharks. And these sharks are really convincing that they're people, you know? And it's like, just imagine being in waters surrounded by great whites, right? Which actually are a pretty good comparison, because from what I understand, great whites are like one of the most primitive species of like living animal on the planet, where they don't have feelings. They don't have emotions. They barely I don't even think they have memory. They just have instinct to kill. And this is what sharks do. They're not really like a deep species. Like, I don't even know if sharks feel pain. Like, I can't remember, but it's like, there's a lot of things about sharks that are like inhuman, very inhuman. They're not like your dog, right? And I think most scientists would agree with that. But imagine being in the water filled with sharks, and somehow you've been convinced that these sharks not only are, human like you, but that they're harmless and that they're actually like really nice people and you should give them a hug. That's kind of what I see as AI, is like we're kind of letting, I don't know, we're voluntarily giving up so much. And I don't think we're aware of like how dangerous that cost can be, because again, you can just extrapolate it to like, what happens when the AI gets so good that it truly convinces you that it is real and human? And then those of us like me, who really love Blade Runner and stuff, we all start asking, do androids dream of electric sheep? When even the programmers themselves of these things are already telling us now that that's a big thing to be afraid of in the future, because they're basically saying it's nowhere near consciousness. Right? We don't even know what consciousness is, but it's definitely not this. But the danger is that they convince people that they're conscious, right? That's the danger, is that people forget. Like they talk to an AI bot long enough to actually think they're talking to someone, when they're literally talking to like a wall, or doing a Google search. That's the equivalent of what they're doing. But it can be so convincing that you can start creating feelings for the thing, which is, very human. We tend to give personalities and feelings to things that don't have feelings, it's always talked about in science too, where people get so empathetic. I mean, it's kind of like, what was the, I'm going to print this out. We finished the flats, so I'm just going to finish this thought. But let me save the JPEG of this too. Thank you guys, by the way, for hanging out. Let's see here. Just think about like, how easily we feel sympathy or empathy for things that are not human. People can convince themselves that like we create these narratives to explain the world around us. So people can convince themselves that like, the level of feeling that like a rat has is like similar to a human being. And it's just like, and a lot of it is like, they'll make assumptions about what an animal is saying. Like think about the Grizzly Man, the movie, right? Where you have this guy who hung out with grizzly bears who were giving clear indications that they were going to kill him. But he just kept empathizing with these grizzlies, like to the point where he's like, no, they're just misunderstood. They're kind of like people, right? I'm in their tribe. They think I'm the grizzly bear. And how dangerous that is to like let our human ability to anthropomorphize, like this is something we do, right? We create Winnie the Pooh, right? Who's a cute little bear. We make little teddy bears, right? We make things that are not human feel human, right? We humanize them. We see, we feel empathy, right? When we look out at nature and you see nature behaving in the way nature does. And we often will want to believe, like, we'll go like, I never believed this as a kid, but some kids might go to Chuck E. Cheese and really think that fake band is a real band, right? Some people they'll see an animatronic and they'll really want to believe it's a real person. Like it's in our nature to want to believe. And so if you have something that's compelling enough, and then you mix that with the human instinct to like humanize everything, to like empathize with everything, And empathy is a good thing, but all dangerous things usually stem from like a good thing that gets corrupted. So imagine just how far that could go. Like if people really believe that these zeros and ones are people, you know, and that these generated monstrosities are actually art. It's just like, it's so dangerous. Anyhow, so that's what I view it. That's at least my first thoughts on it, you know, and I know it gets ambiguous and stuff, but just my gut is like, we're heading into such dark territory, and I don't want to be like a big naysayer. I say nay. Was that from Jim Lujan? Naysayers, I say nay. If not, it sounds like a Jim Lujan bit. All right, so I'm going to call it, guys. We finished the page. Thank you for hanging out with me while we flatted this page. I appreciate it. Jan, it was awesome catching up with you, man. I haven't heard from you in a long time. Paul, it's good to see you. Have a good morning. I'm going to go sleep and yeah, get some rest. But I appreciate you guys helping me get through this in crunch time where I have to get pages out. Have a good one. I'll see you probably later today. I'm going to try to live stream while I'm working on the next page too. So hopefully I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one and enjoy your night. And yeah, hopefully that wasn't too doomer to my little rant on AI. But anyhow, have a good